The silence before the storm. Chief Renee Marshall, a seasoned black woman at the helm of the Crestmore Police Department, never imagined her authority would dissolve the moment she was mistaken for just another face in the dark. It was a quiet Thursday night when it happened. Renee was driving home from a town hall meeting where she'd spent 3 hours listening to community leaders, pastors, and youth organizers discussing ways to build trust between the police and the neighborhoods they served. Her blouse still carried the scent of the old church basement where the meeting was held. She was tired, yes, but proud. They had made progress tonight. Small steps, but forward. She never made it home. The blue and red lights exploded behind her like a cruel joke. She glanced at the speedometer, 29 miles per hour. No eswedabine, no broken taillight, no music, no phone. Her registration was up to date. Her sedan was legally parked under the wide shadow of a maple tree. Still, she pulled over, her instincts taking the wheel. She rolled down the windows, turned off the ignition, placed both hands on the steering wheel. The movements were practiced, automatic. Not because she feared guilt, but because she'd lived long enough to understand what it meant to be black and behind the wheel after dark. A figure emerged from the patrol car behind her. Tall, white, lean. His flashlight beam struck her eyes before his voice did. License and registration. Renee's voice was calm. Certainly, officer. May I ask why I've been stopped? No answer. The flashlight swept across the interior like a spotlight, searching for guilt. Behind him, another figure stood by the bumper, thicker build, square jaw, the type who enjoyed saying, "Don't make me do this." She spoke again. I'm reaching for my registration from the glove compartment. Inside that compartment was her badge. Crestmore Police Department Chief of Police Renee L. Marshall. She didn't reach for it. She handed him the registration and her license. She even smiled politely. Still, she was ordered out of the car. No questions, the first officer barked. Step out now. She hesitated, not out of defiance, but to ensure her movements were deliberate. That moment of pause was all the second officer needed. He yanked open the door, dragged her by the arm, and slammed her against the trunk. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting, she said firmly. He leaned in, the sour stench of coffee and arrogance on his breath. You think talking proper changes the fact that you were swerving all over the place. Click. The cuffs tightened around her wrists with deliberate cruelty. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. She simply looked up at the houses across the street and wondered if anyone was watching. Someone was. 16-year-old Layla Rodriguez stood in her second-floor bedroom, phone in hand, live streaming the scene. They didn't even ask her name. She whispered to her audience of thousands. She wasn't yelling. They just pulled her out. The officers Tyler Boone and Matt Hensley tossed Chief Marshall into the back of their cruiser like a sack of inconvenience. Fits the profile, Boone muttered. Hensley laughed. Yeah, probably a scammer. That polished type. They always have something to hide. They never once asked her name. They never checked the badge in her glove compartment. They never turned on their body cams. But the dash cam in her own car was recording everything. Until Boone leaned in and switched it off. In the back seat, Renee sat straight, hands resting in her lap. Her heart beat steady, her breath even. She had been here before, not literally, but metaphorically. She had seen systems turn on their own, but never had she been on this end of the gun. The cruiser pulled away. Across town, Layla's video reached 20,000 views. Within minutes, it hit 100,000. Comments flooded in. She was calm. They're lying. This happens every day. We just never catch it this clearly. No booking report was filed at the Crestmore precinct. No charges listed. They placed her in a cell, unbooked, unnamed, unseen. And still, she said nothing, because she knew exactly what she was doing. The silence would be her evidence. 30 minutes later, Lieutenant Dana Holloway arrived for the night shift. A sharp woman in her 40s, Holloway had survived 3 captains, a federal inquiry, and a dozen internal investigations. She noticed things, and what she noticed that night was simple. There was a woman sitting silently in cell 4, and no one had any paperwork on her. She asked for a report. Boone shrugged, still writing it up. She asked for cause. Hensley answered, suspicious behavior. Holloway didn't flinch. Body cam. Didn't activate. Battery issue, Boone said. She walked to the evidence room. The dash cam from the woman's car was in a bag, untouched. She loaded it into the system, and she watched everything. The driving, the stop, the compliance, the calm, the silence, the force, the cuffs, the contempt, the statement from Boone. Another black woman thinking she's better than the rules. It wasn't policy. It was prejudice. And it was recorded. Holloway called Internal Affairs. Launched an inquiry. Suspended Boone and Hensley on the spot. Ordered the department into full lockdown until the footage was reviewed. By dawn, the video had gone viral. Civil rights groups shared it. National outlets picked it up. But still, no one knew who the woman in the video was. Not yet. At 7:03 a.m., Renee Marshall pulled into the parking lot of the Crestmore Police Department. She parked in a reserved spot with a gold plaque that read, Chief of Police. She walked inside. The same hallway. The same stairs. But now, they weren't ignoring her, they were stunned into silence. Her assistant, Jordan Kim, looked up, jaw slack. Chief, I need the conference room by 9 a.m. Full staff. We're going to address this publicly and internally. Understood. She walked to her office. The same place they had brought her through the back door hours before. She sat at her desk, booted her computer, began drafting the statement. No anger. No apology. Just truth. The footage played on her screen again, muted this time. Her face on the camera, hands on the wheel. The flashlight. The voice. The cuffs. Her name trending on Twitter. By noon, she stood before every officer in the department. Some looked ashamed. Some looked afraid. Others stared, defiant. She told the story, from beginning to end. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't embellish. She simply described what happened because the video already said the rest. I didn't tell them who I was, she said, because I needed to see if anything had actually changed. She paused. It hadn't. There was silence in the room. Then, slow applause from the back. It grew, reluctant at first, then louder, until the entire room stood. But not because they were proud, because they were ready to listen. The investigation led to policy overhauls, mandatory body cam reform, and a new civilian review board headed by Renee herself. Boone and Hensley were fired, decertified, and indicted. The city of Crestmore learned her name that week not as a victim, but as a reformer. Not as a hashtag, but as a leader. And Renee Marshall kept her badge. But she wore it differently now, not as proof of power, but as a promise. A promise that silence would no longer protect anyone, not even the people who wore the same uniform as she did.